Amber. It's so nice to have you on. I was so much looking forward to this conversation because, as we discussed earlier, I truly believe that if you want to achieve anything in your life, and it doesn't have to be like material things, but whatever you're pursuing, right? Maybe building a family or starting a new project or just feel fulfilled and happy, it always starts within yourself. Unless you address things internally, all the success that you can attract and you will attract, it's not going to stay for a long time. And even if it is, it's not going to be as fulfilling for you. I know that you started your career as a model, very successful, and then you started sharing your writing on Instagram as the Modern Mind. Do you remember that moment, maybe like a turning point that led you to start sharing your creative side with a broader audience?
100%. I remember it very well. I feel like sometimes things happen slowly as they begin, and sometimes things happen all at once. This was one of the things that happened all at once. I was living in New York, and this was in, I think it was early 2018. And I was doing the career that I thought was my dream, which was modeling. And I was really in the pursuit of that. And I feel like every step that I took in the direction of what achievement looked like in that career, I felt further and further away from myself. And it sort of got to this point where I really didn't know who I was anymore. And I feel like I was just getting lost in different people, social situations, and sort of that whole career of validation that I remember this particular morning, I was catching a subway on the way to a casting, and I caught the wrong subway and I got on the wrong way, and I ended up going like deep into Brooklyn, and I was running late, and I remember getting these calls being like, "Where are you? Like, what are you doing?" And I remember I just like sat down in this cafe, got off, and I just was crying sitting in this cafe in Brooklyn. And I pulled out my notes app, which is something that I had sort of habitualized as this access of like the alchemy of turning my thoughts and my feelings into some tangible, practical advice for myself. It was a really intimate process. And this sort of started in journals when I was younger. And then while I was moving and traveling, really just went to my phone. And I was sort of reading back through what I had written, and I thought to myself, actually, this could be really helpful to share. And I thought about it for a while. It didn't immediately start in that moment, but the seed was planted. And I started Modern Mind. And to begin with, it had nothing to do with me, my face, my name. And I think that was sort of my escape and rebellion from modeling, which was only what you physically look like. And it was so nice to sort of hide behind this name. And it also was because I was so afraid of owning the fact that I was putting these vulnerable things out in the world. But eventually it just grew and grew and grew, and now it has the audience that it has, and I'm so grateful for that because it's turned into my full-time career. It's been such an expression of my passion to contribute and to share things, practical tools that have changed my life. So that's sort of the origin of the story, kind of from pain into something really beautiful.
When you're going through challenging times in your life, whatever it is, journaling is one modality that can potentially help you. And it feels like it's exactly what it was for you in the beginning. And then I would assume the writing that you so kindly share with your audience, it's like for them to read their own thoughts and experience from somebody else, but then seeing that person who overcame whatever it is like was for you and where you are right now, it gives hope.
Thank you. That's such a like beautiful thing to share. And I suppose we're in this sort of era of people being the expert in something and giving you the 7 steps or the 8 steps to do X, Y, and Z. And I think there's sort of this calling in our generation coming through of, but I have my own answers and I want to discover what my own way of doing things really is. And I suppose that's the core intention of Modern Mind, is a space to hold a mirror, sharing my own innermost thoughts, but not in a way of telling you how to do something, but to lead you to your own truth of how you get to that same outcome.
The knowledge is there. Why not so many people actually succeeding? It comes down to the same, like you can know how to do something, like to have a framework. I guess like it's also like how you try to approach your community, give them tools, options, alternatives, and whatever resonates with a specific person at this specific time, they can choose from all their knowledge and tools that you share.
It's fascinating what you touch on there is, and I think it's something that many of us deny ourselves of. We actually do know the path forward, but so often what we need is just sort of this accountability or hand holding and this sort of support in order to arrive at that destination and not feeling alone and also having to navigate what internally comes up in that process. And it also ties back to what you said about, when you achieve certain things, you can sit in that achievement and it can feel really hollow and isolating. And that's because we're not looking at the internal metrics that we have to face in order to fully feel worthy or to fully feel comfortable and at peace with what we have, even if we're still striving for more. And I suppose that's something that you might have seen with a lot of clients that you've worked with, is that internal battle between what you have and what you're trying to create and how to find peace within that.
On my first episode, I spoke with Richard Schall. He's a very famous professor at Wharton. He teaches negotiations, and as well as he has his separate, it's called like success course. It's impossible to get a spot there. It's just so popular. And he shared this story. It's so important to find what success means to you and not to somebody else. Because like I don't remember, it was his friend or maybe a student of his. And this guy is like one of the most famous lawyers in Latin America. He gets all those awards. He does extraordinary work. And then he got another award, and Professor Shah was like, wow, it's so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations. How do you feel? He's like, okay. He's like, is something wrong? And he's like, I mean, kind of. I like the work that I do to help others, but I hate law.
Oh my
So
God.
he was like, oh, that's the problem. Do you believe that? And again, like I know a lot of therapists, like people who are in this spiritual community, they say like if you go back to your childhood when you're like 5 7 years old, you're gonna get answers to what your purpose is, what you like, what you don't like, what career you should pursue in life in order to attain that sense of fulfillment. Can you relate to that? Or you think the more we learn about ourselves, the more we redefine who we are?
No, it's a really interesting question. And in the past, I would have said absolutely for everyone, look back to your childhood. And I think it's powerful for everyone to do because there are clues there of that true essence, these sort of things that we innately are drawn to or curious about or want to move away from, that are either rewarded and supported or rejected as we're children. And we sort of carry that blueprint with us into our adult lives. And what can happen is that we have a lot of repressed interests that we would have otherwise have pursued if that was encouraged in our childhood, that could be really powerful to explore as an adult. But I also think there's room in that conversation for people that when they look back to see what they were interested in, they don't recognize anything that applies in the present moment. And I think a lot of people can feel left out in that conversation. And that's something I've sort of discovered through work with clients of guiding them back to see, where are the breadcrumbs of that authentic self to re-invite and to integrate into the present moment. But for some people, they just either they're really disconnected from their childhood experience or maybe didn't have enough experiences that informed them of what they really liked and what they didn't. And so, my advice for someone that identifies in that sort of bracket is just to explore and try as many different things as they can and to really get out in the world and gather new information. And I feel like a lot of the times when we feel really far away from ourselves, is just an opportunity to find our way back home. And the beauty of that process is once we've found our way home once, we can find our way back again. So you only really have to go through it once in order to rediscover what that essence is. But there are many different expressions of that interests or things that delight you or light you up, even as you go through life. So certain things that I was really drawn to when I was 18 or 21 have now evolved as like in my later 20s. And I think there's room for interest to adapt and evolve as we grow and we gain new information.
So true, because even like when I think about my life and when I was at that stage when I felt that I was completely lost and I was trying to see maybe my childhood can give me some clues what I may like in life. And then I would look at myself of when I was like 5, 7 years old, and that girl was so creative. Every time our family members or friends would come to our apartment, I would take not the mic, but like a pen and come to that person and start asking questions. And my mom would
Wow.
always, why do you always ask questions? Like people just came to celebrate, eat food, and drink some wine and dance. I'm like, well,
Mm.
but that's so interesting. But what if the person, the moment they start doing this healing work, like trying to identify who they are, it can get really even worse than it was before you started this journey.
Yeah.
And then you feel like, I cannot rediscover who I am because I don't even know who this person is.
Well, I feel like the discovery of self work, it often feels like it's getting a lot worse before it gets better. And you have to sort of like go into the thick bush and get out your machete and kind of like chop your way through. And it's really challenging because you're looking at all of these things that for however long you've been ignoring. They're sort of like these I wrote a chapter about this in the book actually of like being able to sit with the monsters in the room. And when you have the lights off, it's easy to kind of like ignore them and pretend that they're not there. And when you turn the light on, you really look at them, you can really appreciate them and you sit with them. Over time, you see that they're not really scary at all and they're actually not, in fact, monsters. But when you first turn the lights on, they definitely feel that way and it can feel really confronting and scary and emotional, truthfully, especially to see parts of ourselves that we may have rejected for a really long period of time that we now recognize are really like core parts of who we are. And there's sort of a grieving process that can be a part of that, of feeling sad for rejecting a part of ourselves that we may have been taught to reject or we may have not felt safe to embody when we were younger. So there's a lot that can come up in that process, but it's worth it in order to get to the other side, and it does get lighter. Some of the advice I give to clients as we're kind of navigating through that time is just letting everything to come up. I think there's real alchemy in being able to sit with things and to look at them, and they don't stick. When we sit with things, they really don't stick, and there's this sort of idea that they will, but when you actually look at them and face them head on, they lift a lot faster, and then you leave that room feeling a lot lighter than you did if you kept the light off the whole time. You sort of have this like visions in the dark of what things may or may not look like. So I think just allowing all the emotions that come up and just appreciating that they're all part of the human experience. They're not going to stick, they're not going to mess with your vibration, they're not going to change what you're manifesting or calling into your life. In fact, it's actually going to clear away a lot of the stuff, a lot of the baggage that we carry on a day to day basis. But sort of a tool to kind of have something to hold on to is I love to work with clients and we write out a big long list of all the things that bring them joy, and whether that be connected to things that brought them joy as a child or things that bring them joy in the present moment, writing out as long as a list as they can and then building in those things to their week so they have these little micro moments, these little glimmers in their week that give them something to sort of hold on to during that process. It's confronting, but it's also the work that we do in order to feel this inner peace and well-being long term.
And speaking about manifestation, I know you call it magnetism. Is it the same or? two different things. So magnetism is part of their manifestation process. What is this?
Such a great question. I was so glad that you asked this. So, there is a difference. And I love manifestation and the work of manifestation. It's something I used to do when I was younger a lot. But it wasn't until I discovered the tools of magnetism that I actually started to create things in a meaningful way and also enjoy the process of doing it. Manifestation is sort of this Christmas wish list. So that's how I see it. When I have the new career, when I have the new relationship, when I have the new car, whatever that looks like for you, what people are calling into their lives, I will feel X. I will feel great. I will feel confident. I will feel worthy. And what happens in that process is we enter this perpetual chase of things to supplement a feeling that ultimately comes from within us. Magnetism flips that equation over and makes the most important moment your present moment experience. And it's connecting to a vision of what you want for yourself, of what that most magnetic self looks like, whether that be certain things involved with that, whether it be the relationship or the career. Those can be a part of this vision you have for your most magnetic self, but they're secondary to the person that you are in that vision, the traits that you embody, how you show up, what energy you're in every day. And so it's that energy that we're bringing into the present moment. And then we can trust that we don't need to monitor when things are happening because we know that they're already written because we are the author. And there's this shift of power when we're tapping into magnetism because we're owning our creative ability in our lives. Whereas magnetism sort of outsources that same power to some future point in time. And what can happen is that we end up feeling like our present moment is of lack and it's missing something. And when we're focusing on what's missing, we're actually shifting into a lack state. And so I think there's this really fine line with manifestation that people can go about it in a really empowered way. But I've personally found, and even through noticing the work with the results with clients, that the work of magnetism is a more sustainable way of creating our lives that also involves the enjoyment of how things are now while striving for more. And I think that's the key distinction between manifestation and magnetism. Although they call on similar practices, there
Mhm.
is a difference that I personally believe is really important.
Many people, they think in order to manifest something in their life, they can just put it on their vision board and then remain the same person as they used to be. But I think like the way you put it is like you have this vision board, for instance, or the person you want to be, like all those traits. So starting today, you should act as that person would, like the same choices that person would make. And it makes sense because you can't change anything in your life unless you change something that you do daily. Like by
100%.
embodying this new version, you probably gonna go to different events. You will talk to people differently. You will be in a different environment where like those things that you're trying to manifest, they have better chances to be there rather than like you sitting on your couch in your apartment by yourself and just trying to manifest without doing anything to help the process.
Mm. And being able to attune yourself with what's already going right in your world. As I also feel like manifestation can glance over the beauty of the present moment, the beauty of the ordinary. Because we're like, oh, the bright lights on the horizon is so amazing. Can't wait for that point in time. But what
Mhm.
about the rest of your life? What about the way there, which is the majority, the larger chunk of your life is made up of these more ordinary, mundane moments. And so, how can you enrich those moments with positivity, with radiance, with this idea that things are working for you and not against you, and really tapping into your joy and your delight now instead of some point when?
Do you have personal examples or clients examples that you can share of what you or they manifested in their life by following the process that you teach?
So, I'll share a personal story that comes to mind that I think illustrates the work in motion quite well. I had sort of had this innate calling to write a book for a really long time. And that's something I used to write on manifestation lists. So, like, year by year, like, time and time again, I can track them all back. And it wasn't until I discovered the tools of magnetism and just how important it is to embody the vision in the present moment rather than idealize the future point in time when I'll feel ready for it. And I remember I was traveling with my boyfriend at the time, and I sort of declared to him, I'm like, I'm writing a book. And he's a realist, but he was very supportive. I think he didn't have the heart to tell me how difficult that whole process would be. And I think it's less than 1% of authors get publishing deals. But regardless, I focused on what it is that I would have to embody in the present moment as an author and really like breaking down that vision into habits and daily practices. So I started writing, and sure enough, a month later, I had a publishing house reach out via my website submissions asking if I'd ever wanted to write a book. And it was my dream publisher. And I remember jumping up and down and screaming. But, sort of, to illustrate a really important piece of this conversation, is we were negotiating for, I think it was 6 or 7 months, and I was still writing and showing up. But I started to kind of get into that state of idealizing, the exact details of how it was going to come about. And unfortunately, that deal fell through. And I remember being absolutely beside myself and kind of like grieving for a day, and then returning back to those tools of magnetism and saying to myself, I am an author. I'm showing up as an author. I'm dedicating myself to this practice, reinforcing the delight in my present moment experience. A week later, I had another publishing house reach out. And what happened is I ended up having a bidding war between the two publishing houses, and it actually led to an even greater result. And I think the reason why I share that particular part of the discussion is because a lot of the time we're calling something in and we're wanting to, like, we're really excited about a certain goal, and it can feel like it's slipped between our fingers. And that's the opportunity to double down, to really lean into the practices and the tools, because it's really easy to give up at that point, but all you've wanted is on the other side. And I think that's the beauty of really leaning into the tools that make your experience in this moment really rich and fulfilling, rather than the exact attainment of what it is you're working towards, if that makes sense. Is that something you resonate with, or you have a similar story, or?
I can definitely relate to everything what you just shared because I have so many examples in my life. I would embody the qualities of the person that I'm trying to become. And then things that I want to attract, they start manifesting. But then I would try to control it, how it's going to manifest, when, like, even like to the point, if I get, let's say, a job offer, like how much money they're going to pay me. And then for some reason, this offer or whatever it may be just fall through. But then the moment I go back to being present to who I am, still continue embodying those qualities, there is something greater always comes in.
Mm.
And what they say, like, what is it? Rejection is God's protection, or redirection, or something like this.
Yes.
But I truly believe so. Everything what happens in life is happening for you and not to you. What I do these days when something happens that is not a happy situation for me, I take my journal, what this situation can teach me. What can I
Mhm.
learn from it? And somehow there is always a lesson.
Always. And that's like the beauty of the inner work being your roadmap to this higher self, this higher expression of the experience that you're having. How can you move that into an empowering outcome? And it's simply that placement of focus, exactly as you said. You can look at a situation and interpret it as a disempowering outcome just as much as the empowering outcome. It's up to you to decide what life you want to lead. And I think that's such a beautiful distinction to make that you've like clarified there.
Yeah, it's actually reminded me of a conversation I recently had with a friend. So this person is trying to switch their career, and then in finance they want to do something different. They feel very unhappy. And it's not to say that, like, if you work in the financial services industry, it's not fulfilling. It just, we are all different, but this person knows what they want to do and they're scared. And they're like, oh, maybe I'll already like make enough money. I'll keep doing this thing. But then I refuse to believe that we live on this planet, which is like one of the trillion planets, I think, in the universe. And we were born to this life, to have this extraordinary opportunity just to wake up, go to the office, do the work that just pay your bills, but you feel unfulfilled, no joy or happiness. Come back home, have dinner, watch a Netflix show. Nothing against Netflix.
Yeah.
I do it quite often. And then start all over again next morning. It just logically doesn't make sense to me. You cannot be born to this like beautiful
Reality.
life just
Mhm.
to survive.
No, I
It took
can.
me a long time to realize that though.
I think for most of us, and I think you touch on something that's really important. It's not even necessarily what you're doing, but why you're doing it or the way that you're doing it that really has an impact on your state of being and your mental state. And I think a really powerful exercise that I work with clients on is just really getting clear on their values. And someone can have the exact same life or situation or circumstances, and simple shifts that they can do in their schedule can lead them to feeling really fulfilled and content with that life. Or if they don't have those certain habits or routines that they've built in, lead to feeling really far away from themselves or really unfulfilled. And so, such a simple exercise someone can do is even just writing out a list of the things that they do that mean the most to them, that give them the most satisfaction, that are really like gratifying, and then next to each of those things sort of categorizing them of like, is this to do with self-improvement, is this to do with contribution, is this to do with service, is this relationships, and kind of breaking them down into different areas, and then seeing what the hierarchy is on that list. And there's a bunch of different tools that are free online if you search up like value clarity exercises, and there's one even on my blog on the website. But it's such a powerful tool because you can see, wait a minute, these are the things that I really prioritize in life. I really prioritize self improvement, relationships, and contribution, but I'm not spending time with anyone I love or my friends. I'm not doing anything that feels like I'm working on myself, and I'm not doing anything of service to other people. So it makes complete sense why I'm feeling like things are really hollow. And just by introducing those pockets of time in the week, things can start to feel a lot more rewarding than they did even the week before. So there are these like such simple tools to integrate more well-being that don't require a full upheaval or career change or moving cities. Although I totally recommend that and support that for people that feel called to do so, there are also other things that are within reach. It's sort of like that step by step process rather than feeling like everything has to change all at once.
This is such an important point because even like speaking about careers, right? Maybe you're right. Like maybe your joy and what would bring you fulfillment has nothing to do with the job or the work that you do. It can be
Mm.
in other areas of your life. By the way, congratulations on your book. I know you're releasing it, I think like next year, right? You're
Yes.
a magnet. Tell us a little bit about it.
So the announcement comes out in January. So I'm not sure when this podcast will come out. So hopefully, sort of around the similar time. And the title is You Are a Magnet. It's been something that's been in my heart for as long as I can remember, and really been in the process of creation for the past 4 or 5 years. But the book itself is different to the page in the sense that it goes deeper into certain topics, and it's sort of this journey between starting out in that fearful state, starting out in a state of I don't know what's next, I don't know who I am, I feel really far away from myself, or I sort of know what I want, but I doubt that it's possible for me, or I doubt my ability. And the beauty of the book, it really breaks down this process of where you feel like you are, whether that's in a fearful state, whether you're kind of building that courage, whether you're already in a magnetic mindset, or whether you're just wanting to tap into really experiencing delight and joy in the ordinary moments of your life. You can work from the beginning to the end, or really kind of enter whatever stage that you feel like you're at. And they're a collection of guiding principles that someone can follow that all finish with practical tools or an exercise or a meditation that can really shift you into a more magnetic state. And that's the ultimate goal of the book from start to finish, is really taking these fears and taking these doubts and really living a life that feels good and tapping into the state of magnetism, which is striving for your best and for your vision while appreciating the beauty of the little moments and the quiet mornings and your morning coffee with your lover or your friend or a colleague, and really appreciating the delight in the simple things.
Do you actually create those meditations yourself?
Yes.
Or, wow,
So I kind of my whole process is very intuitive. I It's based on kind of the background of the work and magnetism and the principles of neurolinguistic programming and the coaching world, as well as the spiritual world of intuitively sort of channeling these concepts and these ideas into a way that feels like it's going to be really received by others. And the meditations come from that place of deducing down these concepts into what would be the most powerful way to shift someone's state if they're in anxious thought loop, or if they're doubting their path, or if they're doubting themselves, if they're feeling unworthy, if you're feeling jealous in your relationships. And it's sort of all of these really practical situations that we find ourselves in day to day. And so I suppose that's the common theme throughout the book, and even within Modern Mind, is how can we take these spiritual tools and these practices and apply them to modern life in the city and sort of the things we face day to day.
that's great because again, you're right. Like you can know about the tools, you can read about it, but without those practical steps and someone to guiding you through those steps, like nothing gonna change. You have to do the work, fortunately or unfortunately. But I'm just curious, with all the work that you do you still sometimes feel that you're lost or something is not going the way you wanted? Do you have those moments? Or
Of
they're
course.
gone completely?
No, of course. I'm touching myself. Oh, I'm still a human being. I think it's just a part of life, and it's not about how often that you're slipping or doubting or kind of getting caught in those emotions. It's about the roadmap that you have or the toolkit that you have to find your way out of that. And then again, it kind of ties back to what we were talking about, of like willing to sit with things and willing to hear what they have to say. And so often I face disappointments, I face challenges, I face setbacks, but it's the way in which you look at things that then derives the meaning that you make of that. And so, as you said, looking at things from the perspective of what is this trying to teach me? How is this growing me? What skills or traits would I require in order to navigate this with ease and flow? And taking total responsibility, total ownership of what's coming up, and using it as an opportunity to evolve as a person rather than to feel unworthy or less than, or really like stick in that rut. Although I find myself in ruts often, as we all do, I think it's about an appreciation for the role those feelings play in your growth and in your story, and seeing them as sort of inevitable points that everyone's going to face rather than a sign that you're doing something wrong has been really helpful for me. I'm not sure if that resonates with you as well.
100%. I truly believe that you can always change your narrative. It's just you have to put the work. It's not going to be like on like a straight line of wins. Sometimes you will have setbacks and it's normal. I cannot even like imagine the life without them because if everything is always great, at some point you stop appreciating those things.
Mm.
When those setbacks happen, the question is, are you gonna like give up? or you'll just acknowledge it to see what you can learn from it and move on. And I think that's how you look at things as well.
Yeah, it's such an empowering approach. And I think that's such a core part of Modern Mind is how can you take the cards you've been dealt and then turn that into a great hand? And it's applicable to anyone wherever you're at, of the tools you can use in order to make your mind a more pleasant experience, because we're speaking to ourselves more than we speak to anyone else on planet Earth. And so it makes sense then to try and make that a peaceful dialogue, a loving dialogue, a supportive dialogue, even if that's something that feels really far away right now and really foreign. The willingness to let it feel unfamiliar, to let it feel foreign until it becomes habitual once again. And I think we get so ingrained with the habits of our past, the limiting beliefs that we've come to really see as true about ourselves, that we get wedded to this idea of who we are in the world and our personality and our characteristics, that we don't recognize that it doesn't serve us to show up in that way anymore. And that, in fact, it's not a baked in part of who you are, but just a result of who you've shown up as to this point in time. And at any point in time, a new life is available to you if you choose it. And if you're willing to have the courage to walk that path and to trip and to stumble and to try new things, but to walk that path that looks different, that takes you into the unknown, that takes you into the deep bushes where you have to get the machete out and kind of pave your own way. But it's such a rewarding process and such a fulfilling process that I want everyone to have if they feel called to walk that path.
The one question that I love asking everybody, because I'm really curious, what is one piece of advice you were given that, it's like it was the worst advice and then the best? It can be in your career or professional life. Do you
And
have one?
I think any advice that if you were to act on it makes you feel smaller or restricted is terrible advice. So any advice that someone gives from a place that then you then taking action upon it would make you feel small, terrible
Mhm.
advice. It's a really sure sign that that's some advice that does not apply to you or that would not serve you to follow. And I think there's a real discernment when you're receiving other people's advice of asking yourself and checking in, does this person have the result in this area that I also want for my life? Because we are amazing at giving free advice and opinions. And advice, you've got to really remember at the end of the day, is someone's opinion on what's best for you. And ultimately, only you know what's best for you. So, a willingness to really be discerning with any advice you get from others and really checking in with that question, do they have the results that you also seek in that area? Potentially they have great results in other areas of their life, but just even being able to discern between different areas and where that advice is coming from. So I know that's a little bit more general, but I feel like some practical advice that I've received. And then for best advice, I think I read this somewhere and it's more of a quote than it is advice. And it's everything that you see in the world around you first existed in the mind. And I love that sort of reminder to turn back to because it's such an empowering statement of the power that we have to create and the power we have as creators in life to bring things into tangible reality and to really take an idea and then turn it into something outside of us. I think that's just such a gift in life to appreciate the beauty of the ability to do that.
I don't know how it happened, but if someone would ask me this question, my response would be exactly the same
Oh
on
my
both fronts.
God. Meant to
Even like, it's like I was listening to you, I'm like, oh, this is so weird and strange. But yeah, because like even when I started this podcast and I called it The Narrative, I truly believe that everything what we see in this world was first conceived in your mind. Even like,
Mm.
I don't know, look at that beautiful tall building behind me. First, it was someone's idea. Then they thought, oh, what kind of people will be living in this building? Based on this, they'll have another vision of how the building should be constructed, where it should be located, all the details. And then it becomes reality. But also because this person first conceived, then took the aligned action based on their vision. And here we go. We
Yeah.
have the manifestation.
It's such a, I know there's some people that sort of have this fundamental disbelief of manifestation or magnetism and the power of like visioning and bringing things into life, but we've been doing this since we first kind of like evolved to be on this earth as individual thinkers and thinking things into reality and planning and letting things evolve. That's all been in us for a really long time. So everything you touch, everything you see is a result of that. And who are you to discredit yourself from being able to do the same? And we all do it on a day to day basis, but I think we lose touch with the magic of it because it feels ordinary. And I suppose that's another fundamental of magnetism is being able to see the magic in the ordinary and being reminded of just how miraculous life really is.
100%. Amber, it was such a great pleasure. You're truly a beautiful soul. Like I couldn't even like describe you any other way. I can feel your energy. We are not obviously in the same room, but I can tell that you're the same person as the one who shares all those beautiful writings on your Instagram page, The Modern Mind. And for the audience, where can everybody find you?
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. I feel the same way. It's so nice to connect like
Thank
this.
you.
Modern Mind on Instagram, and then modernmind.earth is the website, which has the courses, it has the blog, the value exercise, and I've recently launched a podcast called the Lightwork Podcast, which I'm loving. It's sort
Wow,
of like
congrats.
thank you so much. It's so rewarding having conversations and the dialogue and the ideas that come up. And even this conversation that we've just had, it's so deeply rewarding and enriching. So thank you for having me here and thank you for inviting me into this space. I'm really grateful.